Here we have yet another recreation of an 80s classic synth from Behringer. It's the Wave. It's an 8-voice hybrid with analog filters and digital wavetables and wave terms, more about them in a minute, and it's based on this, the legendary PPG Wave. And as you can see, the control panel is almost an exact replica of the original, just a bit smaller. It's in the same color, it's got the same sort of knobs, it's got the same sort of keypad for that Commodore 64 aesthetic, and it's definitely given us a whiff of 80s tech. In the center, we've got the main screen, which again is pretty much a replica of the original with the same weird cryptic interface, but we do have the addition of an LED screen, and on the back we've got a whole load of outputs, one for each of the 8 voices, plus we have a CV in, sync in and out for the sequencer and ARP, got channel 1 and channel 2 output, got headphone output, 5-pin MIDI DIN, which has got an in, out and a through, and we've got USB for MIDI and sync into the Synth Tribe app. And the Synth Tribe app actually allows you to upload your own wavetables and transients, and it can take a whole range of sample sizes from 128 to 4096. I've tried this with my Prophet VS samples and it works a treat. Just drag and drop them. And I'll put these on my website so you can buy them, and of course patrons will have access to them for free. And that'll import wavetables from just about anything, I think. Definitely Serum, there's one called Wave Edit, that's free. I'll do it for them. These are my Prophet VS samples, just showing you that it works really. And what gave the PPG Wave its character was the limitations of digital 80s technology, the sort of things that were smoothed out, they were engineered out of later digital synths. But those little artifacts, we quite like them now. I'm going to start off with one that you might not be expecting, and that's the LFO. So here we're in original mode. I'll put it into enhanced mode and you can hear the difference. Original mode, it's a bit sloppy. The CPU's having difficulty keeping a consistent LFO and a consistent LFO shape. But when we go into modern mode, we get something much more precise. It's almost like sample and hold, the original mode, isn't it? But what I'm trying to show here is that they've taken account of all the sort of inconsistencies, the artifacts, and all the weirdness that they got in the limitations of the 80s tech. They've put them in here, but they've also smoothed some out as well. So the next one to look at is the one that we all know, and that's Aliasing. So if I go to this is a bit like my initial patch I've created, and also you can see how we do things with this. Let's go to wave, wave 6. And I know that the end of wave 6, we have a sawtooth. And looking at that on this oscilloscope and on the frequency analysis, you can see we've got loads of harmonics in there. But if I go up a couple of octaves, you can hear all that aliasing. And you can see all those little harmonics in there. They shouldn't be there. They're the aliasing. But if we go into, let's go into program mode, into oscillator 1 mode. This is the modern mode. They've, well, not quite gone, but they're vastly reduced. If we play a chord, you can hear it's much crisper when you've got the anti-aliasing in there. The modern mode not only adds anti-aliasing, it also smooths the transition between each of the different waves. If I load in, let's go to wave 88. This will be my one of my Pro VS wavetables. And if we move through this, there's distinct changes between each of the waveforms, but when we put this onto mode 1, there's a smooth transition. And the other thing that we get on this is imaging. If we put this back onto 0. Now imaging, it's a little bit techy this. I've got a whole video explaining how you create your own samples in detail. So I might put a link to that in the description. But effectively, if we want to use 128 samples, which we're using on this, we need to sample a note up here. Where is it? I think it's an F sharp 4 plus 23 cents. There you go, that oscilloscope showing F sharp 4 plus 23 cents at 375 hertz. So a little bit of maths. If we're sampling at 48,000 kilohertz and we're sampling at 128 samples, divide 48,000 by 128 and we get 375. And that means when we play this note, we're getting exactly 128 samples repeated 375 times. If we've got 128 samples for this note, down here, we need more samples because the wavelength's going to be longer. So an octave lower means it's going to be twice as long, and that means we need 256 samples in this. We need 512 samples for this, and we need 1,024 samples for this. But we've only started off with 128 samples. So where do those other 900 odd samples come from? Well, the synth itself just makes them up, it just invents them. And that's why you get this sort of digital step in. And if we look at this oscilloscope a little bit more zoomed in, there's the steps. And that's probably the only time a graphic representation of a digital wave having steps is accurate, because what you've got is one sample and then it's repeated 7 times, then the next sample repeated 7 times, the next sample repeated 7 times. And what that ends up doing is it changes the wave shape. If you change the wave shape, you change the harmonics, you change the tone. And you can hear it on this in those little harmonics that we're getting above 5 kilohertz. And as we play the notes, they're actually changing with the notes, because they're not like aliasing, which is completely unrelated to the harmonics of the note or to the pitch of the note. These are following the pitch because it's the actual wave shape that's changing. So although they are sort of unwanted digital artifacts, they're quite a nice musical thing. And if we put on oscillator mode 1 again, so the enhanced mode, we lose them. Let's take the release down. So again, they're there if you want them. That PPG 80s character is in here. And the reason you might want to get rid of it is it doesn't sound great on certain waves. It's still a usable tone. It's a lot harder and dirtier, but you might much prefer on this one the modern mode. So the PPG has the imaging, and so does this if you want it. I don't know if it's identical to what you get on the PPG. I haven't put it next to the PPG. I might take it to my mate Barney's Nan's house studio and have a play with his PPG if we get the time to do that out of interest. But as far as the character goes, it's definitely got that sort of character. Things like the Pro VS, the Behringer Pro VS, for example, that was meant to be, or is sort of hyped as being a single voice as the Pro VS, but it didn't do any of this, so it didn't sound quite right. And the way it makes it do this is because it's using those 128 samples in those waveforms, and that means that it's got to use a really high CPU rate. And they did that originally in the PPG because it used less memory, so they could use the 128 samples, get away with using less memory, but it meant you needed a faster CPU. So it's just an interesting thing to see that this really does it, and it does it properly. These are DDS oscillators. They're not FPGA like you get in a Super 6 or a Peak. They're much more expensive actually, which is how come they've managed to do this, I think, bringing it in at £569. Really good. No smooth transition through the waves, imaging, and all that aliasing. That's the PPG tone. I'll run through the interface, how it all works in another video, especially how this menu system works, what you do with the numerical keypad, and what all these strange combinations of letters are. The interface is very much like the original PPG. If you can use an original PPG, you can use this. The only differences are some of the menus are slightly different. You've got additional bits and bobs in here, like on the sub oscillator, we've got sync, we've got ring mod, and we've got noise. Also, I'll explain exactly how the oscillators work, what the upper wavetable is, things like that. I have actually recorded it all, but it's just getting too cumbersome for a single video. And I know a lot of you are desperate to know, before you buy it, does it sound like a PPG? Does it do all those PPG things? So hopefully this video has answered that, and hopefully you got something from it. Hopefully somebody somewhere enjoyed it. If you did, please think about subscribing, ring the bell. And if you are going to buy one of these, do click on one of my affiliate links, because that all does help to support the channel. As I say, in my next video, I'll go through everything in a bit more detail. But for now, I hope that was okay. I've got a little track coming up. It's just me messing around doing something very, very un-80s with it and trying to use it a little bit like a drone. I'm messing around with the LFOs and the wave oscillator, using the wave oscillator position, almost like a cutoff, because obviously in your wavetables, it sounds like on some of them, that's what it is. It's someone tweaking a cutoff. So using that as a separate filter to that, just trying to do something a little bit more experimental than maybe definitely you heard in the intro track with that very cheesy sounding 80s bit of music. So yeah, if you did enjoy it, do join me on Patreon. Patrons get access to patches, samples, tutorials, and all sorts of other little goodies. Do take a look at my starskycar.com website as well. There's patches, the samples, the stuff to download. There's free bits and bobs and the stuff you can buy. Do take a look at some of the cheaper stuff, because it all does help to support the channel. And I have put up there my Profit VS waves as well, if you want to pick them up for this. I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for staying to the very end. I'll see you very soon with the rest of this video, or the rest of the explanation at least. Cheers.